Tatiana, as you know, is the executive producer, director, camera person, film editor, and makes sure that whatever we're doing gets out there. So if any of this has any value, she's deserving of top billing, lots of credit. She keeps it going, which is wonderful. Anyway, I've cooled down a little bit, and I'd like to talk somewhat about, I guess, has a lot to do with time and things that come into existence and then go on through time. So a good example of what I'd like to talk about is just take the United States of America, so-called. Back in the 18th century, around 1770-something, the colonies, they were British colonies, they owed their allegiance to an English king, and they were managed by a great deal by England, even though there was an ocean. But a bunch of people got together and decided that no more king, that they wanted a different type of a government, different type of political system that did not have a king or a queen or all kinds of fancy nobles, things like that. And they came up with the idea of a democracy. It's not a new idea because about, I don't know, maybe a couple thousand years earlier in Greece, a place called Athens originated the idea of a democracy in which the government was of the people, by the people, and for the people, and the government derived all of its power and its existence from the people, demo. It wasn't like, here's this system, and you learn to live with it. It was, the people had everything to say about it. So here we are, 1700 or 2,000 years later, in the United States. A bunch of guys and gals got together and said, let's make a democracy. To heck with King George and the Queen and all the nobles and all the taxes and all that, and we'll make a democracy that will have a constitution, and in the constitution it will say that the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that it exists to serve the general welfare. That people should have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then as the Bill of Rights was written, the Constitution further guaranteed freedom of speech. Elsewhere, freedom of speech could get you hung, killed, put in jail, you and your family destroyed. Dictators don't like freedom of speech, nor do royalty. You said, what did you say about the king? We'll hang you right here. You don't have to wait for anything called justice or a trial. So here was this idea. It's an old idea. Liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom to be wrong, but freedom to say it and to counter it not with guns, bullets, and hanging, but with voices of reason. So this was a great idea, and it was called a Republican democracy. Republican didn't mean political party, it meant of the people, republic, people. The government comes from the people, not the people come from the government. So this was a great idea, and it was called United States of America. Once it got a constitution going, but it had to fight. It had to, the people that had those ideas had to be willing to fight and die to see them come to pass, because England was determined that these colonies shall not be free that way, and that freedom of speech and all kinds of things like that. No way. But, for better or for worse, the colonies prevailed, and they eventually turned themselves into the United States, and by dint of destroying the Native American culture, called Indians, and anything else that got in their way, including black people and Spanish and so forth, we finally ended up with the United States of America. The beautiful Constitution, but 200 years, 230 or 40 years later, that ideal is not exactly the same anymore. It's still called the United States of America, it's still called the Constitution, it's still called freedom of speech, it's still called freedom of association, it's still called all these different things, but as the government has moved away from being a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, it's become the very things, in many ways, that it was invented or formed not to have, in which, in present time, the United States does not resemble the original idea. It's a government of special interests. It's a government where many of the elected people owe their political office to those people who can buy enough television and enough votes to get them there. Freedom of speech is still pretty good, but up to a point, you could say certain things that would get you into trouble. But I can still stand out on the corner and say, I think this President of the United States is a dirty, dumb, stupid asshole. And when I go to bed tonight, there won't be some knocks on the door as the secret police take me away and I end up in Siberia. I don't think that would happen, at least. I haven't done it lately. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that the name is still the same, but the actual government is not the same. It happens with a human being too. They start out in many ways pure, innocent, curious, alive, filled with ideals and motion and all kinds of things, and add about 40 or 50 or 60 years to that, and you may have a real son of a bitch on your hands who has gone from being a wonderful, beautiful, charming, gorgeous creature to a mean, vicious, older person with lots of hatreds and all kinds of terrible things right up until death. So time can, even though I'm still called Phil, I'm not the way I was when I was 18. I'm trying to be, because I have some understanding of what to do with case when it shows up and things like that. But if you just hang out with little people or young people or the people here at the university, you will see and feel things that you don't find in a lot of older people. as they become, their bodies change and their ideas change, and people can end up like George W. Bush, or they can end up going from being a beautiful baby to Joseph Stalin, or from being a beloved child to Adolf Hitler. Just to name a few people that aren't considered to have been very friendly when they grew up. Because children are generally friendly until we teach them who to hate and who to watch out for and all that nice stuff.